Hello, everybody, and good morning to our webinar. Today, we're going to talk about the connected legal department. Today, with my colleague Maurits Annegarn. He's responsible for our API integration team, and I'm Jeffrey. I'm the marketing manager within legal software. And today, we're going to talk about the legal department and why it's so important. Maurits, please enlighten us.
So, good morning, Jeffrey, and good morning, everybody else. So some of you may have seen this graph before, the digital maturity curve that we have often presented in previous webinars, where we talk about the journeys that legal departments can go through in digitalization, starting from scattered data, moving towards data centralization. Maybe you're going to start using Legisway to collect all of your corporate information, contracts, and other legal information. Start looking at process automation, automated workflows, but also automated calculation of share structures, for example. And finally, starting to involve the wider business, giving them access, giving them a portal to ask questions to the legal department. Ultimately, really involving more intelligent solutions, automation based on your business rules, so you can get to that end goal of becoming a legal center of excellence. Now, part of that is really the sharing of information. So we believe that a very important part of this happens during the data centralization and process automation stages, where the information that is within Legisway becomes more and more relevant to the wider organization.
Okay. So for today, I got a lot of questions written down. If you want to ask questions, there is a chat box, so you can ask us questions. But my first question to you, Maurits, let's get started. What are APIs?
Yeah, so that's actually quite a technical story. And people talk about APIs in many different ways. And to be honest, it's a little bit like talking about the cloud. There's so many wrong answers that there are no wrong answers. But in general, people understand it a little bit, that it's about letting two systems talk with each other. System A needs to talk to system B. But the basic understanding is that as long as you have APIs, they're connected. It's easy. Okay. It's a little bit more complicated than that. And I want to at least explain the basics here, but I'm not going to go into full technical details. Starting with what does API actually stand for? It means Application Programming Interface. You can immediately forget that again because it's completely irrelevant. Okay. But at least you know what the abbreviation stands for. So, in reality, software system A is written and speaks in a certain language that is semi-unique or at least specific to that system. And the same thing goes for software system B. And these systems can't really talk to each other easily because they just don't understand each other. So for that reason, you would build an API inside system A and an API inside system B to sort of speak a generic language that those APIs each understand. Imagine like you would have your own personal translator when you go to some foreign country and they have a translator as well, so that you can do business together.
That will be handy.
Exactly. Right, and one of the common languages spoken between APIs is JSON. And it's not relevant, but to remember at least, it is relevant, but you don't have to remember it. Okay. But there's multiple of these common languages that can be spoken. So yeah, from there you would think, okay, then the APIs can talk to each other. But APIs are in nature passive. They don't actively reach out to each other, and they're a little bit more removed. So what you need is something in between. And I promise after this we're going to get less technical and talk more about other elements. Okay. But you need something in between to connect these APIs together. Basically, you need a courier that takes the message from API A to API B and vice versa, or at least determines when this information is moved. And that is, for example, why we created the Legisway Integration Hub, which is where we can organize these integrations to say, okay, give me your message, I'll bring it to the next system, and vice versa, to organize that traffic, if you will.
Okay. Okay. And good story, quite technical.
Yeah, a little bit.
But why does it matter for a legal department?
I think that's a key question. So really, legal data is within your entire organization, right? So it's not just within the legal department. sales, procurement, HR, finance, IT, everywhere legal data is used, created, modified, and you want some level of control over it. Right? So if you want to keep all of that information, for example, synchronized across multiple systems, multiple departments, it can really become a time-consuming effort that is also quite error-prone, especially people living outside of the legal department or with less knowledge of the legal world, if you will. They will also care a little bit less about some of that accuracy, like correct legal names for your counterparties or legal entities. Right, so that's why we really believe that legal departments need more control. They should really, in the end, be in full control of all the legal information and processes within an organization, no matter where it lives, not just in the legal department. And it's our goal really to make that possible with the Legisway integrations. However, there's also really a financial aspect to this. It's not just about a vision of legal departments being involved with the wider organization and having that level of control. You can also make quite a simple calculation. So for example, in orange on the left, if you don't have an integration and you need to synchronize contracts between, for example, Salesforce and Legisway, it's going to take you 10 minutes per contract to get the metadata out, to type that into another system, to check if everything's correct. And 10 minutes doesn't seem like much, but if you then have 25 contracts per week, that turns into 217 hours on an annual basis. Annual basis. And according to the IACCM, a person involved with contracting, it doesn't say whether that's a general counsel, paralegal, or contract manager, or whatever. On average, costs 110 euros per hour, everything included. It might not show up in your paycheck, but you know, all the social costs and everything. And that comes down to 23,833 euros per year in cost, just for getting contracts from system A to system B. And this is excluding any costs that might come from mistakes you might make, because everywhere you have a manual process, no matter how good you are, if you're doing that many on an annual basis, you are going to make some mistakes. And then those can be costly. Imagine like a contract that has the wrong renewal date or termination date. Not just awkward, but it can actually be expensive. So if you can automate this process so that through an integration, this data automatically flows from system A to system B, from Salesforce into Legisway, for example, maybe it goes down to 1 minute per contract. Maybe you want to have a quick look to see, is everything okay? So let's imagine it's 1 minute per contract remaining, still on 25 contracts, it's only 22 hours per year, right? So only 2,420 euros per year in cost. Now, if you include on top of that the cost of running an integration, and there's an annual fee involved with that to host something like that, and maybe even the cost of an initial creation, if you want to have an integration that's specific to your organization, you have quite a big bit of spending space to do that. And in your second year, that's a pure return on investment. Once again, that's excluding the additional benefits of accuracy, speed, and the simple
the work to be done.
Exactly. Because you can do other work. You're creating value with the time you're saving doing other stuff.
Now we talked a lot about contracts. Does your team also work on other matters within the legal department?
Yeah, it's not just about contracts, right? So you can really apply this to a lot of different elements. So you can imagine, for example, we're working for one client right now, and they want to have an accurate overview of relevant employees for their litigation management. So we're synchronizing their HR data into Legisway so that they can have the right list of people involved there. You can imagine that legal entity information is relevant for other systems. There's quite a few different use cases in this regard, and we can get into that in a moment. But this is really return on investment. This story is really why we created the Legisway integrations team. That's the team that I manage. Using the Legisway APIs, we really created it to provide integrations that we feel increase and realize the true value of legal data, legal information within organizations. Not just to save time, but really to also increase that quality and the accuracy of legal data across the entire organization. There's one difference between us and maybe your own IT department or a third party that can help you out with it. And that's that we really understand legal departments. We understand the goals, we understand the targets, what makes you tick, the things that you worry about. And that makes us slightly better at understanding how to build such a process, how to position it, than your more traditional IT partners that you might need to first educate on what is the life cycle of a contract, what is a contract, right? There's a lot of small things that we just have way more experience with, and that's one of the reasons that we created this team, because we saw that a lot of our customers, we've had APIs available for a while now, but our customers were struggling trying to realize their own integrations. Not all, some customers did great. They have a great internal team that really understand what they're doing. But for many, this is a great extra service that can just help realize that extra value.
Okay. And if we talk about common use cases, what are the most the questions you get? What could be a good thing?
So really, there are a lot of different questions that we get. I'm having conversations with clients and prospective clients almost every day. Really, at this point, it's really picking up speed. And in general, it differs wildly which systems they want to integrate with, but the use cases come back to some fairly similar situations. So my first example that I want to give is the synchronization of master data. What is master data? That's really the primary thing that's used throughout the entire organization. That's marked as, okay, that's our master data. For example, you are managing your legal entities in Legisway. Probably the most accurate place where that information is kept is within the legal department. So you want to share that information because it's really key for the performance of the rest of your organization. Finance needs it for their reporting and for their systems and for spend management, etc. HR needs it. Other divisions like sales and procurement, they need that information as well. And what we can do, for example, is we can synchronize that data that's in Legisway. Maybe we can do that once per day. We can do it more often. Depends on your needs in this regard. And say, okay, we're going to put all of that legal entity data perfectly maintained by the legal department into a master data management system, generally abbreviated as MDM. But it's basically like a centralized database within your organizations. Most large organizations have something like this, where your IT can then make sure that it's just distributed to all other business systems. Now, if you don't have an MDM, that's not a problem. We can also directly integrate in this situation with your ERP system like SAP or Microsoft Dynamics, or with your HR systems if needed, etc. Right? We can push that data directly into those environments. So here we see a little workflow on the bottom of the slide. So the Legisway integration hub that is basically checking, hey, is there new information available in Legisway? And if there is, we then retrieve that information and then send it to the master data management system so that there's always an accurate overview there. It's fairly simple, but this can add a lot of value in your entire organization because really you're no longer sending out spreadsheets with this information that somebody else then needs to pick up and implement into their system and synchronize across the board with all problems that can create. It's much faster, much more accurate.
Okay.
So that's one use case. Another one is really that looks a little bit similar from a process flow perspective, is about supporting the contracting process. Now, I picked a simple use case here, but when it comes to contracting, it can get pretty wild and pretty complicated depending on how far you are in your automation and what automation you need. But for example, your sales teams are creating contracts in their CRM systems, such as Salesforce, for example. And really, they're just doing their work there, right? So sure, they're involving the legal department when it gets complicated and when there are issues in negotiation. But in general, there's a lot of deals that also get closed outside of your immediate supervision. You know what? That's fine. But you do want to have a view of everything that is contracted and all the obligations you have as an organization from a centralized perspective. So maybe you want to synchronize all finalized contracts in your Salesforce environment and have them basically sent to Legisway for centralized reporting at the minimum. right? So next time you have an issue with one counterparty, you can see, okay, maybe we have an issue for that contract, but we have all these other commercial obligations that are relevant, so take that into consideration. And so there, our Legisway Integrations Hub can check Salesforce, say, hey, are there any new finalized contracts that fall within the scope that we're looking at? Because maybe you only care about contracts over 50K, for example. That's what I mean with scope. Over 50,000 euros, dollars, doesn't matter today. It's the same right now, right?
It's true. I heard that. Yeah.
And we can then grab those new contracts from Salesforce and create them in Legisway, right? And with create them, we can even do that in several stages. Maybe your process, your way of working, you want to have them created as a draft, so that you can finalize them and say, well, this is accurate for larger deals. Or we can just create them and be done with it. But at the end of the day, the important part here is that you don't have to do everything manually again. You don't have to chase your commercial teams for latest contracts that have been signed. Stuff just happens automatically and everybody's happy.
That sounds like an ideal world. Well, for example, if I want to start this integration, where do I start? How do we get this going?
Yeah, so that's always a difficult question. So I created a quick start guide. So basically some questions that you can take home and
you already knew that I was going to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like we do this more often.
Maybe.
So really the first question to ask is pretty obvious, but what system do you want to have integrated? You can even draw a little map and say, okay, I have system A, system B, and draw little lines on how data needs to flow. In general, you don't have to go that far. That's really our job to do that for you. But let's say your answer is, I want my Legisway integrated with our Salesforce environment. Then the next thing is to describe what is the job that needs to be done. Right? We often talk about use cases and all sorts of terminology, but I'm really talking about what is the job that needs to be done. What would the job look like that you were doing yourself if you weren't automating this? What would you put on a job application, for example? So maybe here the job is to that finalized contracts need to be stored in Legisway, so we have a complete overview of our obligations. A little bit of reasoning on the why you would want to do this job is always relevant, because that helps you determine the value down the line. Then how often does the job need to be done? You want to make the time frame here pretty small, because if I ask you how many contracts do you enter into Legisway on an annual basis every year, that's not an easy thing to calculate. But if I ask you how many have you done last week, then you can probably tell me with pretty decent accuracy. My next question would be, is it like that every week? And if you tell me, on average, then I can calculate the entire year, basically. Right, so try to make the time frame small, makes it easier to do. So let's say 25 contracts every week, like we had in our example earlier as well. Then how much effort does the job take today? Right, so if possible, associate a cost with that, but that's not always as easy. Like how much time do you spend on it? Right, so we said, for example, 10 minutes per contract to store them manually in Legisway. Then finally, a little bit on the negative side. What happens, or is the cost if the job is done bad? That's not always clear, but you can at least describe it, because it'll help you also to later on explain internally why this is something that you want to do. For example, if I make a mistake, we may miss a termination date or deadline. Can be quite expensive. Then finally, what data and documents are involved? And with this, I mean, you don't have to get into full detail, but you can. You're going to need to get into full detail eventually anyway. So if you say, well, I want the counterparty name, start date, end date, termination date, and title synchronized into another system, including the final signed document or maybe all documents, right? That's what you can then define. With this already gives a pretty good idea of whether creating an integration is a good idea and what that would kind of look like. So this can tell me, for example, almost enough to create an initial design for you and create an estimate of how much effort it would be. But it can also tell you whether it's relevant to do something, because if your answer to how often does the job need to be done is once per week, and how much effort does it take 5 minutes, then it's probably still irritating, but also not worth automating.
No.
Not yet, maybe. Maybe there it's better to wait until something standardized that is just plug and play and doesn't require an effort to realize comes your way.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. I think I have enough information on how to get started. Then I received an email from marketing, I don't know, a while ago, and it mentioned something about an integration you made with the Dutch Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, with the KVK, or the Dutch Chamber of Commerce. So what we've done there is, and this is one that's been requested for a lot by our customers, like user day, pre-COVID. We had an entire panel about this, and this was probably the most popular integration. And for the longest time, we made an assumption that this was for your corporate information, but it turns out that, you know, you're a legal professional, you know your changes to your corporate information before the KVK because you tell them.
Yeah.
Right. So what is more relevant here, and the use case that we focused on, is third-party information and the accuracy you want to have there. And as we all know, salespeople, marketing people, not the most accurate when it comes to this kind of information, not legal level accuracy. So what we've done is basically make it possible to just simply enter registration number, KVK number, and then our integration hub will search the KVK for the base profile. And the base profile contains company name, trade names, address details, date of incorporation, but not much more than that. So that's what we've realized for the first integration with KVK, which is now available to any customer. Doesn't matter whether you're on Legisway Essentials or Enterprise, V4, V5, whatever, doesn't matter. It's available for everybody. And I have a short video here included that shows you a little bit on how this works. So on the right side, we see the configuration panel that we use to build this integration, where I can basically map anything that comes from the KVK, what we're seeing here, with anything that's available in Legisway. So I can say, well, this information needs to go there. This includes only the information on the base profile. Right, so I can then in Legisway create a new company, a new legal entity, and the only thing is that I say it's external, and I need to say that it's in the Netherlands because, you know, KVK is primarily Dutch information. The legal entity name doesn't matter. I can just type whatever, like a salesperson would say DK Tech BV instead of the full name of the company, but I need to enter the registration number. Now, at this stage, it can take up to a minute for the information to be retrieved. So that's going to happen. And with up to a minute, I literally mean it can be 5 seconds or it can be almost a minute, right? So it refreshes once every minute. We can see that happening on the right. We're looking at the next time the integration happens. And once that minute's over or a little bit below that, we can refresh the information and we can actually see the full accurate information. As we see here now, the legal entity name, Bold Secure Technology BV, the address, which is now accurate, and we have the incorporation date and the last synchronization date.
Okay.
And that just makes it so much easier to retrieve that information without a lot of hassle, without a lot of effort. And it kind of helps people just move on instead of spending a lot of time on it. Meanwhile, you can guarantee the accuracy of the information that you have in your system because it comes straight from probably the best source, KVK.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
So are there any further questions at this point, Jeffrey?
No, you answered all my questions, so that's a good start. Currently, it's a small group, we're only 20 people today, and I don't have any questions yet, so we'll give them 1 minute and we'll stare at each other during that 1 minute.
We'll stare at each other for a minute.
Yeah, and then we're gonna check if there are any questions. And otherwise,
well, maybe in the meantime, I can tell a little bit about our plans for the upcoming period.
Good.
So we, on the one side, we offer like custom integrations, right? So if you have a specific use case that you want to get into, give us a call, talk to your relationship manager, or reach out to me. And we can discuss basically what that means for you and what's possible and what we can realize. But at the same time, we're also working on sort of standard use cases, standard stories, standard integrations that we can kind of offer out of the box. But kind of, I mean, it does require some configuration, some setup, but it doesn't require full custom development. And these integrations that we're currently working on, at least my ambition, is an integration with Salesforce. I mean, I've talked about it quite a lot already today. I want to realize that. It's actually going pretty well already. Not fully finished yet, can't show it yet, but it looks good. And I also want to do sort of synchronization options with Microsoft Dynamics. For example, we see a lot of organizations that are vetting their suppliers in Microsoft Dynamics, so sort of a process like, is this a supplier we want to work with?
Yeah.
And after they are approved, basically, we want to synchronize their information into Legisway, so they're available for contracting.
Okay.
So that process happens automatically. That's another use case we often hear about, and I want to realize that as well. So those are definitely in the pipeline right now, but I'm always interested to hear about what you think is relevant and we should be working on.
Yeah, let us know. So relationship manager, if you're interested, or if you want to discuss other things,
Can go directly to me.
Maurits Annegaard.
Yes. Right, and really, as always, and this goes for anything you want to do with Legisway or want to do with legal software, start with mapping out the process that you're looking at, right? Try and identify things that are now inefficient within the way you're doing that. So where's your cost, where's your value? Consider the different options that you have, and then choose something that adds proven value, which in general is Legisway. So
thank you.
One question at the end. Gabriel,
is it also possible to get an extract out of the COC for your own company?
Yes, so that's actually a really good question, and it is on my wish list as well for hopefully later this year or early next year. Now, you're asking if we can retrieve that extract, for example, every 3 months. I mean, possibly, but there's of course a cost associated with retrieving an extract. So what we'll most likely do is create a simple button inside Legisway that allows you to say retrieve extract, and you then get a confirmation screen whether you are okay with paying the fee for that. Because you do need to pay fee directly to the KVK. This is not something you're paying towards Kluwer. Because you are creating your own account with the KVK to do this with. So we're just passing along the information. We're not asking any fees for that. So probably we'll do it like that. And if you then want to do that every 3 months, let's have a conversation what that looks like for you and what the value is that you would get out of that.
That's good.
Yeah, but definitely going to happen at some point. Sounds perfect. Thank you, Gabriel.
Okay. Right on time, I think. I'm very happy with the information I got.
Very good.
I hope you all enjoyed the webinar of today. If you have any questions, email Maurits or contact your relationship manager. For now, I just wish you a lovely day.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.